If you ache for truth, goodness, and beauty, if you're hungry for a Christianity with substance and strength, if you long for a faith that's big and bold and biblical and all about Jesus Christ, if you're inspired by the idea of one church that has spanned 20 centuries, 24 time zones, and 2 hemispheres, enfolding every race, nation, and language, then you're considering Catholicism. Sometimes God speaks to us in the most unexpected ways, like through a dream that flips your whole worldview upside down. That's exactly what happened to a listener named Claire, and it set her and her husband on a path straight toward the Catholic Church. But along the way, they've hit a snag that's familiar to a lot of folks coming from Protestant backgrounds. What do we do with the kids during Mass? So today, we're tackling Claire's question head on. Now, she says she's grateful for how this podcast has guided her journey, but she's got 4 young kids, and the evangelical churches that they've been a part of had these super engaging, fun-filled programs, that made Sundays a blast for the little ones. And now, eyeing Catholicism, she's wondering about all the battles, the tears, the meltdowns, when the kids have to sit through the boring Mass with the family. So, what's behind the difference? Is it just priorities, or is there a deeper theology at play to why evangelical churches have these super engaging children's worship experiences and Catholic churches don't? So I'm going to share my take. I'll draw some from my own experiences consulting with megachurches, what the data says about whether those flashy kids ministries actually work, and most importantly, what the Catholic Church teaches on forming faith in the next generations. This one's for all the parents out there wrestling with the same thing. To start out, let me read you a bit from Claire's email. She writes, "Hi, Greg. First of all, thank you. Your podcast has been an invaluable companion on our road to Rome. My husband and I are beginning OCIA this fall, and we couldn't be more grateful for the clarity and encouragement your work has brought to us." Well, you're welcome. She goes on to describe how her journey kicked off in 2019, right after her mom passed from cancer. She says that those final months were rough. Her mom changed, became harsh at times, and Claire was left praying, "God, just please show me that she died in your grace." And then, bam, Claire had this vivid dream. Her mom looking tired, like she'd been climbing uphill, saying, "I'm not there yet, but I'll get there. It's going to be so worth it when I get there." So, Claire wakes up with one word on her heart: purgatory. Now, at the time, she thought it was just some weird Catholic thing, but it sparked her research and it brought her peace, and it opened up the door to Catholicism. From there, she and her husband, her from a non-denominational megachurch background and him raised Unitarian, well, they started exploring. They tried, everything. The Acts 29 churches, the Assemblies of God, Reformed, house churches, Anglican, EV free, evangelical free, that C.S. Lewis hallway metaphor where he says, you can't live in the hallway forever. You have to pick a room in Christianity. And there are all these doors to different rooms. And so they went in one by one trying them, but none of them quite felt like home. Anglicanism, she says, was the closest. It was like Catholicism with the volume turned down. I love that phrase. But eventually they realized we found our home in the Catholic Church. But here's the rub. The question she wants my take on is, how does the Catholic Church think about children's ministry, especially in contrast to the evangelical world? We have 4 young kids, and if I'm honest, that's been one of our biggest hesitations. Evangelical churches have incredibly engaging, dynamic programming for children. When we moved to the Anglican Church, Sundays became a battle. Tears, meltdowns, and struggles as the kids tried to sit through the liturgy. She says, we understand and even love the Catholic vision of families attending Mass together, forming children through the rhythms of worship. But I can't help wondering, What lies beneath the difference in how evangelicals and Catholics approach kids in worship? Is it just a difference in priorities or theology or something deeper? So Claire, thanks for listening. Thanks for writing in, and you're spot on. This is a huge hesitation for families like yours. And I've gotten emails from other Protestants and parents saying the same thing. And frankly, I know a lot of young Catholic parents that struggle with this. Truthfully, I knew a lot of parents in the Protestant world that struggled with it. Our kids struggled with it when we had young children. Look, it's not just practical. The issue of what to do with your kids in worship cuts to the heart of what worship is and how faith gets passed down. So let's unpack that. Let me kind of go back and share a little bit of my journey and how I came to understand this. So back in the 90s through like the early to mid 2010s, I was deep in the evangelical world. I was working as a consultant for contemporary megachurches. I was working in Christian publishing. And so I was on airplanes every week, helping to design and integrate with and cast vision for these massive ministries, including these massive kids ministries. So I'm talking in some of these megachurches, auditoriums that would be bigger than most small Protestant churches. And they were like a full-on auditorium. They have live bands, big screens, fog machines. They basically mirrored the adult service, the big auditorium with all the excitement, the audio, video lighting. But they just dialed down the content to make it age appropriate. Now, some places had children's worship areas that were really play areas that just would make your head spin. Like I saw places where parents would drop off the kids, they'd get a barcode scan for security on the kid, and then the kid would slide down a tunnel into this wonderland of like ball pits and gym equipment and even animatronic creatures like talking trees and owls that would spout Bible stories. I mean, it was like a Bible-based Chuck E. Cheese. It was like Disneyland. In fact, a few times in my work, I even bumped into a company out of Orlando. It was a bunch of ex-Disney Imagineers who hired themselves out building these environments in megachurches that would rival theme parks, all with this Christian twist for children. Now, let's be honest, not every church could afford all of the full bells and whistles like some of the ones that I went to that had 10 or 20,000 people on the weekends, but even the smaller ones aspired to it. Their pastors and staffs would go to conferences where they would see the 20, 30,000 a weekend people and see the kinds of things they were doing at those mega churches, and they'd come back and try to scale it back, but follow the same principles. And the principles were entertainment first, hyperactive programming, all about keeping kids engaged and excited and amped up, so that when the parents picked them up, they would be like, "This was great. I want to come back next week." Now, this whole approach rested, if you think about it, on 4 premises. First, separate the kids from parents so that they can both enjoy their own tailored Sunday experience without distractions. Second premise, make it fun and thrilling. And kids will love church. They'll stick around through teen programs, young adult stuff, and eventually, someday, they'll graduate up to the big room with the adults. Third premise, worship is about creating a memorable, rewarding Sunday experience. It's consumer-oriented. It's measured by how pumped up everybody feels afterward. And the fourth premise, breaking the congregation into age groups and customizing the product for each is not just right. It's smart marketing that builds demand and keeps people coming back. But you know what? Over time, flying on all those airplanes every week, afterwards I'd be coming home and I'd start feeling this dissonance, like this discomfort. Like I wasn't comfortable with what we were doing, with what I was doing. Flying around, seeing all this cool innovation, I began asking, is this right? Is it biblical? Does it align with God's call for Sabbath and worship? And then, heck, does any of this even work? So let me try to answer my own questions there, or at least share the answers I came up with. On the is it right front, I began to dig into this and to really read and study and reflect. And that led me to some conclusions. Is it right? Nah, not really. There's no biblical precedent for segregating families like this during worship. Scripture shows families together. So think Deuteronomy 31, where Moses gathers everyone, including the little ones, to hear God's word. Or Jesus welcoming children into the midst of what he was doing with the adults. This whole generational silo thing, there's no precedent for it in Christian history. It's a modern invention born in 1990s middle-class America from marketing strategies and consumer culture. Part of my own story was when I finished seminary, the church planting agency that I went to work for paid for me to start my MBA program in marketing because they wanted our church planners to have the theological background of seminary, but also to have the latest training in business marketing. It was a thing in the early 90s when I started in that world. And really, I remember all that emerging from people like myself and others sitting around in rooms going with whiteboards going, how do we product market ministry? And it was a consumer culture premise to reach, and we were conscious of this, to reach a consumer culture. We used to sit there and say, how do we get the people who go to the mall? How do we get the people who go to McDonald's, to Starbucks, to go to all these places? How do we utilize the successful principles of those places to draw them in? There was a super popular book about 20 years or 25 years ago called The Disney Principle. And it was really popular in the church growth world, where people were saying, and also there were, I remember going to conferences where we had people from Nordstrom come and talk about how Nordstrom was like the most successful department store. We were looking at all these models. I went, I think 3 or 4 years in a row to this conference in New York City and Orlando and different places where it was the theme park industry designers, like the people who designed, Disneyland and SeaWorld and all these things, with the Imagineers getting together, talking about how you reach people and engage people and how you design memorable experiences. I mean, this was very conscious. This is what we were trying to do. And that really has, again, no precedent in church history. It's just something that a bunch of us came up with in the 1990s. It clashes with the perennial teaching of the church. Catholic history, Eastern Orthodox history, even the historic Protestant traditions, all of them that taught that faith formation happens within the context of the family unit in liturgy, not outsourced to entertainment and marketing pros. Okay? And the other question that I found myself asking is, does any of this actually work? Is any of it actually successful? And for that, we don't need philosophical speculation or biblical reflection. We just got data. So studies from groups like Barna and Lifeway show staggering dropout rates. 60 to 75% of young people raised in church in the last 30 years or so bail out in their late teens or 20s, often for good. They just never come back to church again. One Barna report pegs church dropouts at 64% overall. And for Gen Z, so those would have been the kids growing up in it, is going to those programs I'm talking about, nearly half of them rarely or never attend church anymore. Lifeway found that 2/3 of teens who attended regularly in those kinds of programs drop out for at least a year after high school. We've spent billions in the church growth movement, the evangelical megachurch world, on flashy programs to entice Gen X and then millennials and now Gen Z, and none of it has stemmed the tide of them leaving the church. At one conference I went to, I heard a speaker say, the church in America threw hundreds of millions, if not billions, at engaging and entertaining these generations, and it didn't work. Because as soon as the parents couldn't make them go anymore, they dropped out like flies. And I think in retrospect, it's obvious why, because it was all a bait and switch strategy. So you draw them in on Disney level fun, Christian Chuck E. Cheese programs, and then expect that at some point along the way, they're going to switch their preference to quiet, reverent liturgy. I mean, the bait and switch, just no wonder it fizzles out. So, what's the Catholic alternative? I think it's rooted in deeper theology that worship isn't a consumer experience. It's an encounter with Christ in the Eucharist. It's the sacrifice of the Mass. And families are meant to share in that transcendental moment together. The Catechism of the Catholic Church nails it. In paragraph 1656, it calls the family the, quote, ecclesia domestica, in Latin, the domestic church, where parents are, by word and example, the first heralds of the faith to their kids. Paragraph 1657 says that the home is the first school of Christian life, where everyone learns divine worship and prayer and the offering of one's life. And then if you jump to paragraphs 2204 to 2206, the Catechism says the Christian family is a community of faith, hope, and charity, reflecting the Trinity, and it's called to partake of the prayer and sacrifice of Christ together. And paragraph 2223 says that parents have the first responsibility for educating kids in virtues through tenderness, forgiveness, and good example, teaching them to subordinate material stuff to spiritual realities. Now, all that being said, the Catholic Church does offer individual parishes some flexibility for kids. So the Directory for Masses with Children from 1973 aims to help children encounter Christ joyfully in the liturgy. So it allows parishes to make some adaptations, like simplified readings or a children's liturgy of the word, where preschool and early elementary kids go to a separate space during the readings and homily for age-appropriate explanations of those things, and then they return back into the church for the Eucharist. But that's optional. Some parishes do it, some don't. And it's not a full separation. They only leave during the liturgy of the word, during the readings and the homily, and they come back in for the liturgy of the Eucharist. Because the emphasis is on fostering full participation, not entertainment. So if you look at that document, paragraphs 8 through 15 stress family unity, and paragraphs 41 through 47 stress adaptations that build towards mature worship. Okay, they should be building toward that. And the U.S. Council of Catholic Bishops guidelines also echo this. So they say to focus on catechesis through adult witness. And remember, kids under 7 aren't even obligated to attend the Mass per canon law. Okay, so there's no reason that your 3-year-old has to be there. It might be a good idea for them to be there, but your 3-year-old isn't obligated to attend the Mass. And then some parishes use programs like Catechesis of the Good Shepherd. It's like a Montessori-style approach. They don't replace the Mass, but they're used during the week to prepare the kids for the Mass. And they can be great where available, but generally in Catholic parishes, the norm is families together, forming faith through the rhythms of the Mass. And it's theology-driven. You're prioritizing sacramental formation over fun because real encounter with Jesus sticks deeper, than the fog machines. So, Claire, I get it. Those Sunday battles are real. Tears in the pew, meltdowns during the homily, and the stares from everybody around you. Like, why can't you control your kid? Look, I've been there as a parent. We raised our kids, making them sit through church, and we fought those fights. I can tell you how many times I had to march my kid out to discipline them. And that was really hard when I was the pastor and preaching, and my wife had to do it, okay? And I see it in parishes, Catholic parishes, all the time. And I hear it from parents just like you. And frankly, I hear it from people in the church, like, what do we do about these kids that are crying and blah, blah, blah. But here's the thing. A, it's not right to outsource formation to entertainment. And B, the data says that it doesn't work any better. It's maybe worse than the old-fashioned way of family worship. There's no study that convinces me that separate kids' services produce lifelong Mass goers. Instead, it's that bait and switch again, and your kids are likely to just never go back as soon as you can't lose the power or the leverage to make them go. Okay? Claire and anyone else out there struggling with this, what do you do? We all like to say, pick your battles. Pick this battle. This is a battle that's worth it. Teach reverence early. Explain the Mass parts at home. casually, like, hey, this is when we kneel because Jesus is really here. And, use sticks and carrots, do whatever. But I mean, if there's some kind of battle you're going to fight with your kids, teaching your kids to be in the Mass and to grow up with reverence for the church, I can't think of a more important battle to fight. Now, look, I'm a big fan of geographic parishes. Go to the one nearest you for that sense of community and belonging. But if there's a parish nearby with lots of young families where kids are welcome and there's no angry baby boomers shooting you dirty looks, that's supportive, it has cry rooms and family sections if needed, well, then go there, okay? Because it's going to suit the needs of your family better. And remember, your example is gold because kids are watching you and they see you kneel, they see you pray, they see you receive communion. That's powerful. It builds habits that last way beyond sliding them down the tunnel into the ball pit with the animatronic tree that tells them Bible stories. So hang in there, Claire. God's grace is in the struggle. You're fighting the good fight. You're fighting a battle that matters. There's nothing more important than to fight for the souls of your children. And your family's OCIA journey, I'm praying for you. It's going to be worth it. So thanks again, Claire, for sharing your story and your question. It's encouraging to so many others that are out there dealing with the same thing that you are. And for those of you that are listening and have a similar hurdle or a different hurdle, drop me an email. Let's talk through it. That's what this podcast is about, exploring Catholicism thoughtfully, faithfully, one step at a time. So until next time, may God bless you as you consider the faith that was once and for all given to the saints. Thanks for listening. We'll be back with another episode soon. But before you go, can I quickly ask you to do 5 things? First, please rate the podcast on whatever platform you listen on. That really moves it up in search rankings. Second, please write a review on either Apple Podcasts or on our website, consideringcatholicism.com. That encourages others who are searching for a Catholic podcast to try this one out. Third, please share it with others. Send them a link or post an episode on your social media. Fourth, please write me at consideringcatholicism.com or leave a comment on our website. I'd love to hear your comments, your questions, and your stories. And finally, this podcast is 100% donor supported. My donors keep me going, they help cover my costs, and they let me dedicate more time to researching, writing, recording, and editing to get the episodes out to you faster. So please consider giving a one-time or recurring donation through the links in the show notes or on the website so that this ministry can continue and grow. And never forget, Christus vincit, Christus regnat, and Christus imperat.